You're about to see how real possession works. Forget everything you've heard. Here, I'll show you the 3 stages that a spirit goes through to fully take over your body, and believe me, they're constantly trying to invade your mind. I'll also reveal the 5 spiritual rules that allow possession to happen and how to avoid becoming a victim of these monsters. Drawn from testimonies of exorcist priests and spiritualist books, I'll tell you a fictional horror story, but with real spiritual events that could happen to you or someone you love. I'm the writer, and this is the House of Terror, where you're entertained by intense stories that hold true spiritual teachings. Subscribe to the channel because at the end of the video, I'll show you the leader of all these entities. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the demonic possession. Jonathan sobbed as he watched his father land powerful blows on his mother right in front of him. Helpless, he cried while the family patriarch finished and calmly turned to do the same to the poor boy. Bruises and wounds were common on both mother and son. The atmosphere in that house was thick with fear and sadness, but for Jonathan, it stirred something more: anger. The boy's heart felt tight from the sheer intensity of his hatred. All through his childhood, this aggression gnawed at him from the inside, like a caged monster begging to be released. And there was a perfect place for this monster to come out. At school, no one was safe from Jonathan's wrath. He would target everyone: outgoing kids, shy kids, tall, short, good-looking or otherwise. The only ones he left alone were the girls. Only cowards picked on them. In his mind, every boy was destined to turn into his father. But since they were his size, Jonathan didn't feel afraid. The school barely reacted. Only a few warnings and calls to his parents, who never showed up. Jonathan was the undisputed ruler at school, surrounded by a gang of boys who followed him like a leader, full of malice and eager to see chaos. They applauded and aided in everything their leader wanted, until he showed up. His name was Samuel, always with his hood up and a closed-off look. His face wore a serious, anger-filled expression. Recently moved to Jonathan's neighborhood, Samuel's father didn't lay a hand on his mother, not because of restraint, but because she had escaped long ago, never to be seen again. His father never hit him physically, but in drunken stupors, he'd lash out with the harshest words a boy could hear. During a break, the 2 boys from different classes collided, and their mutual hatred clashed instantly. The group went silent, tension rising in the air. After a round of insults, they agreed to settle things after school, just a few blocks away. The battle was set and word spread quickly. Everyone was eager to witness the event. The biggest problem was that the living weren't the only ones waiting. The energy radiating from those 2 was pure hatred, drawing in various entities eager to watch from the sidelines, some of whom would certainly meddle to make the fight more interesting. And with that, we have our first rule. Rule 1. Law of attraction. All your thoughts, feelings, and emotions emit energetic vibrations that attract people and spiritual entities who resonate with them. If you harbor negative thoughts, you'll attract dark spirits who will try to take control of you. Though it's challenging in today's world, we must focus on maintaining positive thoughts: gratitude, love, hope, strength, and determination. Banish hatred, resentment, bitterness, and vengeful desires, as these will make you a beacon for them, drawing in as many as possible toward you. The time had finally come. Just steps from the school entrance, a crowd of students had formed a circle around the 2 boys. They stood face to face near the school gate. It had been 5 minutes since classes let out, and despite the chatter, teachers and monitors pretended not to notice. After all, it was no longer their problem. Jonathan felt a chill. His opponent was confident, well-built for his age, and tall. Was he about to be humiliated here, in the very place where he released his anger?
No, he's not going to humiliate me in front of everyone. My friends are in the circle, shouting to hype me up. The girls are watching to see if I am the alpha. I'll show him. I'll make an example out of him. I'll beat him until he's all red and purple. I'll make sure the ambulance has to go. I'll make sure the ambulance has to come get him. I won't stop until he's just about to sleep. Forever.
Wait, these thoughts, wow. Jonathan was startled by the intensity in his mind. Was he really thinking this? He enjoyed fighting, but not to cause such severe harm. What if the kid didn't make it? No, he only fought to gain respect, never to hurt that badly. When he glanced at Samuel, he noticed the boy looked unsettled too, staring at the ground and shaking his head, as if fighting off some dark thought.
But who said he won't bring you respect? He's just like that. Look at him. One day, he'll act just like that. They're all like that. And if we never want to get hurt again, I have to go beyond.
Jonathan charged, full of uncontrollable rage, even forcing the confident boy to retreat. Samuel's eyes widened before closing as a brutal punch broke his nose, spilling red from it. Samuel collapsed, and seeing this, Jonathan felt like a god, a king, a ruler punishing a disobedient follower. It felt good. No, it was exhilarating. He only stopped when nearby adults intervened, rescuing Samuel, who was already defeated and unrecognizable. Jonathan laughed with satisfaction, savoring the fear in some eyes, the admiration in others, and even the mischievous glances from a few girls. Samuel was rushed to the hospital, and in that moment he realized the second rule. Rule 2. They aren't your thoughts. When a dark spirit tries to speak into your mind, it will always feel like the thought is your own. So always stay vigilant. Know yourself well enough to recognize when an external thought is trying to invade and what truly belongs to you. This usually happens in moments of agony, loneliness, frustration, or deep sorrow, times when you are most weakened and vulnerable. In the hospital, Samuel had one eye swollen shut, his face covered in bandages, but even through his one good eye, he saw his father entering the room in tears, rushing to embrace him. They held each other tightly, and Samuel promised his father he would never use his strength for harm. In return, his father vowed to face his own demon of addiction for his son's sake. Despite his deep anger toward life, Samuel resisted the voice that urged him to drain every last drop from Jonathan. He kept his energy closed off to darkness, giving it no room to enter. Jonathan, however, said yes, and now he feels he could set the world on fire. And with that opening, Jonathan is about to enter phase 2. Jonathan looked at himself in the mirror and loved what he saw. Like Narcissus, his confidence and vanity blossomed. He had just returned from a diner with his father, who had started being nicer to him after the day of the fight. Jonathan thought his dad would be furious when he was called to the station, but instead he praised him, saying he had finally become a man. His dad wasn't so bad. It was his mom who was the problem. She complained too much, demanded annoying things. They didn't see eye to eye anymore, so Jonathan started wearing headphones to drown out her shouting. What used to feel like love and kindness turned into distorted illusions. Jonathan began seeing everything differently. His mother's advice, once valuable, now felt like cruel nagging. Her comforting touch, which once chased away nightmares, now felt nauseating. She was irritating, and his father was the victim. Jonathan moved through his teenage years this way, psychologically draining his girlfriends, exhausting his friends, manipulating, lying, and using people. Yet in his mind, he truly believed he was just defending himself. Little did he know that a dark spirit, now with permission to get closer, was working in his mind, distorting his perceptions and manipulating his interpretations. The breaking point came when Jonathan's father introduced him to a man whose expression was dark and intimidating. Jonathan trembled at the sight of the towering figure but tried to play it cool. This man was his father's boss. He offered Jonathan a job with the promise that, if he performed well, he'd receive his own toy, a small iron piece with 12 bullets, and eventually his own crew. Power born from pure corruption seeped into Jonathan's energy. He accepted without hesitation. And so began a life where Jonathan intimidated, removed inconvenient people from his path, collected debts in cruel ways, and became a respected enforcer. He kept saying yes to every dark thought that grew stronger within him. Unbeknownst to him, he was now followed by dozens of dark entities feeding off the pain he caused, until finally the entity reached the coveted Phase 3. The party was incredible. Jonathan danced, waving his metal toy in the air, indulging in white powder, green smoke, drinks, and everything else he desired. He had plenty of female friends who would pull him aside for private moments. His wife was at the party too, quietly watching with a broken heart, saying nothing. The last time she had, her eye was swollen for days. She regretted it all. He had seemed so strong, imposing, courageous. She'd fallen for him fast, and even faster she'd become a mother. Jonathan had promised to build a family with her, but he only paid attention to their son when he was yelling at him. He had promised not to lay a hand on the boy, a vow Jonathan took pride in. However, he didn't hesitate to call him worthless, trash, useless worm, failed project, and even a walking condom ad, words that stung more than any blow. But in Jonathan's mind, he was being a great father. The party ended, and when the couple returned home, they paid the babysitter who had been watching their 7-year-old, then went to bed. Jonathan, chemically intoxicated, still felt exhausted. No matter how much he slept, he could never fully rest. It was as if his energy was constantly being drained. In the bathroom, he vomited again, seeing red mixed with his bile, as well as in his stool and urine. The entity accompanying him, stronger than ever, now commanded every second of his life, having drained its puppet of every last drop. Now it was time for the final act. When Jonathan went to bed, he had nightmares, coughed, felt ill, until he awoke, and finally saw it, sitting on his chest, hand gripping his throat, laughing and mocking him.
Give me the woman and the boy. The woman and the boy.
No, this was insanity. He'd never harm his family. He loved his son. His wife, despite the fights and betrayals, was still his, the one he wanted beside him until death. How could he even think this? But then, the thought morphed, transforming into a voice, an external voice. The sinister being laughed, declaring it was too late. Jonathan had fed it all his life, obeyed every command. Now, he was its slave. Jonathan tried to scream, but no sound came. He struggled to move, but not a single muscle obeyed. Then he sat up in bed, completely possessed. There were no flickering lights, no screams, no objects flying around, no sign of the possession other than his vacant, unblinking stare, pupils dilated. With that expression, he turned to the other side of the bed, where his wife lay sleeping. She was his next victim. The creature, now in control of Jonathan's body, knew exactly what it would do, with whom, and how. Rising from the bed, the entity walked silently to the kitchen, opening a drawer and pulling out a large knife. It grinned as it inspected the blade. "Daddy, are you okay?" The entity turned to see a small boy standing in the hallway, barely awake. Jonathan saw it all as if in a dream, his vision blurred as though watching from up close yet from far away. Inside, he felt enormous agony, but he couldn't move or scream, as if trapped in a coffin 6 feet under, struggling for every breath. Jonathan watched as the entity, still smiling, took the boy's hand, guiding him along. The child followed, understanding this as a silent command. The entity led him into the bedroom, placed him in a chair facing the bed, and then, with the weapon in hand, approached his mother. What the boy saw would stay with him forever. His screams echoed through the room, but he couldn't move, only watch, his mind fracturing in trauma and despair. Jonathan screamed in his mind, desperate to wake up, but he wasn't asleep. Trapped as both spectator and the one acting, he felt his hands doing the work, unwilling yet unable to stop, as if in a trance, lost in a blur between dream and reality. Then he turned to face his son, eyes burning red, and laughed. The boy's strength drained as he froze, too small to fight back, watching as his father, weapon raised, approached him, until the front door burst open. Rule 3, from suggestions to commands. The more you listen to that dark, obsessive thought, the harder it becomes to resist, gradually transforming into a deeply rooted command. This command turns into a habit, and like all habits, you barely notice yourself doing it. The man left his AA meeting and spotted the police cruiser parked nearby. He smiled, seeing Samuel, his son whom he was so proud of, sitting in uniform and playing with the siren. Samuel greeted him, and once again they talked about life as Samuel drove his father home. Life had never been easy for the two of them. There were times when his father relapsed, moments when both nearly broke their promises. But despite the pain, they stayed strong. Samuel had channeled his anger into exercise and martial arts, a release that his boss allowed as he helped clean the gym. That beating didn't stop Samuel from getting into fights. It only fueled his desire to fight back against bullies and defend the innocent. One day, a police officer was called to the school, Jonathan's old school, and seeing Samuel act as a vigilante, he took a liking to him, offering guidance and advice. When the officer retired, Samuel was already a recruit, and he vowed to his mentor to never turn his back on the innocent. Today, Samuel is respected in his profession. Every Thursday, he drops his father off at his front door, sharing a long, warm hug before heading back to his rounds. What made Samuel such an exceptional cop was a steady intuition that seemed to follow him. After experiencing dark thoughts of his own, he made a vow to himself never to wish harm upon anyone. Since then, he'd felt a strange, pleasant chill, a calming force that gave him strength and focus in high-pressure moments. This intuition, like a second voice, provided him with calmness, strength, and a sense of justice. Even among delinquents, he commanded a certain respect, always treating them calmly and listening to understand their struggles. It was that very intuition that made his heart race as he suddenly veered right, off his usual route. Something in his mind directed him back to his old neighborhood, the place they left after the fight, the environment that had fueled his father's drinking and his own troubles. His radio buzzed as dispatch asked why he was off course, just as the operator reported a call about screams and sinister laughter nearby. With confirmation, Samuel sped up, finally arriving at the house, where a child's sobbing echoed from within. Feeling a deep instinct to act, he skipped protocol and found the front door. With almost supernatural strength, he broke it open and hurried toward the back of the house where the bedroom was. Inside, he found the bed soaked in blood and a young woman lying still, lifeless. Turning to the armchair, he saw a boy staring into the darkness as if he'd seen a ghost. Then Jonathan emerged like an apparition, plunging a knife into Samuel's shoulder. Samuel fired point blank into Jonathan's stomach. He aimed to fire again, but the possessed Jonathan slapped the gun away, sending it across the room. They locked eyes, as they had back in school years ago, but now they were adults with different paths, choices, and voices whispering in their ears. The rematch was about to begin. Rule 4, merged minds. The dark spirit and you begin to think as one. It no longer needs to whisper in your ear because you now share the same intuition. From this point on, it has complete control over you. For years, the spirit will try to dominate you like a puppet on strings. The more you listen to it, the harder it becomes to stop following its commands. This time, Samuel charged at Jonathan too, and the two collided in a brutal exchange of punches, kicks, and blows, while the little boy, frozen with shock, was forced to watch. Eventually, Samuel managed to pin Jonathan to the ground, pressing down on him. He looked at the boy and shouted for him to run. The command seemed to give the boy strength and clarity, and he leapt to the floor, his feet barely touching as he sprinted out of the house. Realizing he was beaten, drained, and out of power, the entity laughed, savoring the final act. It left, allowing Jonathan to regain control. But this time, there were no mental distortions, no dark energy clouding his thoughts. Jonathan, fully himself, was forced to confront the horrifying reality. His wife lay there, unrecognizable, right in front of him. He screamed in agony, his mind unraveling under the weight of what he'd done. He spent the rest of his days in a psychiatric hospital, and when he found the opportunity, he ended his life prematurely. Outside, police cars and an ambulance swarmed the scene as the press scrambled for details. Jonathan's criminal history was laid bare, including the story of his school fight with Samuel, now a hero cop. In the ambulance, the boy sat quietly, looking at the floor, until Samuel knelt in front of him. "I'm here for you," Samuel managed to say. The boy, facing a long and difficult journey, found himself supported by Samuel, who promised to stay close. As they embraced, Samuel felt that familiar, reassuring energy ripple through him, and this time, it comforted the boy too. For a moment, the boy felt safe. Rule 5. The Eternal Battery. If nothing stops the dark spirit, it will use that person as a constant source of energy, a personal battery, without them ever realizing it. And when the puppet is near the end, the spirit will push them toward a tragic fate as its final act. The story isn't real, but the process you witnessed with Jonathan and Samuel truly happens. And that's not all. There exists a being, once a living human, who now leads a massive legion straight from the Umbral. This channel will soon reveal who he is, along with a variety of tales, spiritual encounters, monsters, chilling stories, and terrifying worlds. Subscribe to this channel now, and let me bring the darkness into your home.